Come along as I recount the unexpected tale of when my daughter's fiancé stumbled upon me during a rather embarrassing incident. Thank you so much for watching the video and taking the time to leave a comment. I truly appreciate it. I'll be continuing the story very soon, so stay tuned. I was unaware of his presence nearby. Only after I straightened, water still clinging to my thighs, steam rising against the mirror-like smoke from a fire already ignited, did I reach for the towel. The worn piece with the tattered edge, the one I consistently reached for when the house lay silent. I have just emerged from the shower, unadorned and unashamed, my skin aglow and tender. I shifted my body, one hand gliding through my damp hair, and it was then that I caught sight of the shadow lingering in the doorway. He found himself suspended in time, his hand gripping the doorknob, caught in a moment of stillness. He was not meant to be here. He shouldn't have been gazing at me in that manner. I too found myself frozen. Inhale deeply, exhale nothing. Initially, my body turned against me. I left myself exposed. I refrained from reaching for the towel. I simply gazed at him, sensing his eyes traverse my form with a warmth that enveloped me. His name lingered, trapped in my throat. Lucas, the fiancé of my daughter, her beloved golden child. The individual who addressed me as ma'am during our initial 3 encounters. I apologize. His voice trembled, low and nearly hoarse, yet he remained steadfast. His gaze held, his eyes fell, and yet I remained still. I allowed him to gaze. There was a part of me that wished he would. It was but a fleeting moment, perhaps 3 seconds, or maybe 4, before he closed the door with a decisive thud, and I could hear his footsteps hastily fading away. The hallway enveloped him, yet my heart remained restless. My hand shook as I finally enveloped myself in the towel, clutching it tightly to my chest, as if I could contain the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. I ought to have experienced a sense of shame. Instead, I felt alive. That night, I lay in bed, wrestling with my thoughts far longer than I would have liked to confess. I shut my eyes, attempting to concentrate on the whir of the ceiling fan, the faint murmur of traffic in the distance, and the gentle cadence of my husband's snore echoing down the hallway. Yet all I could sense was the warmth spreading across my cheeks, the flutter in my stomach, the thrum between my thighs that lingered persistently. I pressed my legs tightly together, battling the thoughts of Lucas's gaze, which seemed to linger on every inch of my skin, on my lips, and on the part of me he had no right to see, yet had. The following morning, he avoided my eyes. I couldn't either. He perched at the kitchen island, observing as my daughter busied herself with her phone. She was completely unaware. She hummed softly, radiating joy as she discussed wedding menus and seating arrangements, while Lucas gazed into his coffee as if it held the promise of an escape. I set a plate before him, and our fingers lightly grazed each other. It was merely a touch of knuckles, yet the electric connection between us almost stole the breath from my chest. Though we had not uttered a word on the matter, that afternoon I encountered him once more in the hallway. His hand grazed my hip, subtle yet deliberate, a whisper of intent in the touch. The sensation lingered for hours on end. I reassured myself that it held no significance. On that particular evening, my husband found himself immersed in work long after the sun had set. My daughter sat in her room, engaged in a FaceTime conversation. Silence enveloped the house. Descending the stairs, I poured myself a glass of wine, my bare feet gliding over the cool floor, still clad in the silk slip that lingered beneath my robe. Lucas sat in the living room, his gaze fixed on the screen, the sound muted. He raised his gaze as I stepped inside. His lips parted ever so slightly. I was merely on the brink of surrendering to slumber, I remarked. He nodded, yet remained still. I did not either. There was an electric tension in the atmosphere, a palpable heaviness that enveloped everything. As I drew nearer to the counter, anticipation tinged the air. He rose to his feet and approached me with deliberate slowness, at a pace that feels almost languid. "You looked beautiful," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "This morning, A constriction gripped my throat. Lucas, I never intended to gaze so intently. I found myself unable to cease. I gulped with difficulty. You really shouldn't say that, I whispered. I am aware that he drew breath. Then his hand grazed my arm with a whisper of a touch. I pivoted to meet his gaze. His eyes fell to my lips, then descended further. I did not retreat. He inclined closer. I allowed him to approach, and when his lips finally brushed against mine, there was a palpable hesitation in the air. Fearfully captivating. He kissed me as if it were a secret he had begun to grieve. As his hand glided beneath the hem of my slip, discovering the bare skin between my thighs, a gasp escaped into his mouth. I shouldn't, he murmured. Yet, you're already that, I remarked. His fingers radiated warmth. Inquisitive. They ascended, skimming the edge, grazing the inner part of my thigh, as if he were caught in a delicate dance between curiosity and retreat. My breath caught in my throat as his knuckle brushed against the place that was already damp with anticipation. He stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. Gazed upward. You're not wearing anything beneath this, he murmured softly. A blend of inquiry and skepticism. No, I mentioned it was barely audible. I had not anticipated that anyone would catch sight of me. He breathed out slowly and unsteadily, as though he were submerged beneath the waves. And I was the final breath of life. Our lips remained untouched once more. This is not the inaugural instance. He lingered with his hand pressed against me, as if he were in disbelief of my existence, fearing that I might disappear if he dared to shift too quickly. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I did not. I was unable to. I extended my hand to his wrist, gently steering his fingers to the precise location I desired. His fingers glided through me, slow and tentative, as if he were discovering something sacred. My head fell back. Her lips parted, a whisper of breath escaping. Oh dear! He let out a low groan. Please refrain from making that statement. You will bring about my downfall. I found myself brushing against his fingers before I could rein in my impulse. Thighs quaking, breath held tight within my chest, fingers clutching the edge of the counter, a desperate attempt to avoid collapsing to the ground. He remained still, his gaze fixed on my face, as if it were the most genuine thing he had ever encountered. I drew him into a kiss, filled with a yearning that left me trembling, excessively profound, alarmingly swift. Sampling the brink of a flame that could consume us both. His body pressed against mine, firm and eager, and I instinctively reached down, my fingers curling around him through the fabric of his jeans. He exhaled into my mouth. This is not a course we should pursue. We are already engaged in it. Yet, on that particular night, we chose not to venture any farther. A door banged shut in the upper floor. Her voice rang out, airy and carefree, imbued with a purity reminiscent of the innocence I once possessed. We recoiled from one another. I made a slight adjustment to my slip. He retreated, brushing his hand against his jeans, his chest heaving with rapid breaths. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm not. I spoke too quickly, too candidly. He fixed his gaze on me for a moment, then pivoted and departed in silence. I found myself unable to drift into slumber. The sheets enveloped me with an uncomfortable snugness. My skin feels too warm. I found myself wide awake, attuned to the delicate echo of her laughter drifting through the wall. Each time I shut my eyes, his visage appeared as I reached my climax. I revisited it, inhaling each breath, savoring every touch, until the lines blurred between shame and hunger. The days that followed were marked by an unsettling silence, a quiet that kept me wide awake. He kept his distance, occupying the far side of the room, leaving dishes in the sink rather than passing them to me, yet I noticed his gaze, always lingering, always watching. As if his body possessed an innate awareness, his mind continued to resist the truth. One afternoon, as I folded laundry in the guest room, he glided past me, his hand lightly grazing my waist. Not difficult, merely sufficient. I remained unyielding. I allowed it to unfold. Our silence transformed into a language of its own, a weighty pressure, an unspoken question that lingered between us, one we both hesitated to voice. Then arrived the evening she departed for her bachelorette weekend. 3 days, just the two of us. The house loomed larger, its silence resonating with an unexpected intensity. I prepared a modest dish and uncorked a bottle of wine. I was certain she would not fail to hit her mark. He entered the kitchen without shoes, clad in a soft gray shirt that hugged his chest. His hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes held a deeper shade than normal. He remained silent, merely pouring a glass, taking a seat opposite me, and observing as I ate, as if he were yearning for something far beyond the meal. As I rose to carry my plate to the sink, he trailed behind me. Neither through words nor through uncertainty. He leaned in, his chest warm against my back, lips grazing my shoulder while his hand wrapped around my waist. "I can't shake the sound of your voice," he murmured. As your presence graced my fingertips, my knees gave way beneath me. I clutched the counter. "Lucas." He spun me around, pressing his lips against mine with a languid tenderness. More profound this time, without a doubt. Then he lifted me effortlessly onto the counter, parting my knees with both hands, kissing the inside of my thigh with a reverence that felt both sacred and forbidden. He whispered, his tongue already teasing, "You taste just as I imagined." Sweet and perilous, I breathed, fingers tangled in his hair. As he brought me to ecstasy once more, his mouth lost in me as if he would perish in that moment. As he rose, my fingers trembled as I unbuckled his belt, releasing him from his confines. He felt warm and substantial in my grasp, already oozing. I caressed him softly, savoring the way his hip quivered forward, the way his jaw tightened. "What is it that you desire?" I murmured softly. "You," he said. "I desire each and every one of you." He took me right there on the counter. A single, profound thrust that took my breath away. I entwined my legs around him, my arms draping over his neck. Our foreheads touched, a gentle connection as he entered me, slow and profound, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. We remained silent, yet our movements spoke volumes. The sound of the wine glass clinking softly behind me mingled with the subtle hum of the fridge, while his quiet moans escaped with each tightening embrace I offered. I returned once more, feeling utterly powerless, and he trailed behind me, releasing a jagged, broken cry against my neck. After we remained entwined for what felt like an eternity, his head nestled against my shoulder, his breath still a rhythm of unevenness. "We find ourselves in a predicament," he remarked. "I am aware, and I have no desire to cease." "I am aware of that as well." The following morning, I chose not to evade him, though perhaps I should have. Instead, I brewed 2 cups of coffee, placing his on the counter in silence, without uttering a single word. He emerged a few minutes later, barefoot once more, his eyes still heavy with the remnants of sleep. He glanced at the cup, then turned his gaze to me, offering no smile, just a subtle nod, as if we were silent accomplices, burdened by our shared secret, trapped in an unspoken pact. I took a sip, leaning casually against the counter. He sipped his drink, casting furtive glances at my collarbone. The unspoken events of the previous night lingered in the air, palpable and weighty, filling the silence that enveloped us. Each time his hand grazed mine by the sink, I felt an irresistible pull to stay close, more than was necessary, posing questions that required no answers, volunteering assistance for tasks he could easily manage alone. He allowed it, his gaze trailing after me as I exited the room. He lingered too near as we crossed paths in the hallway. Once, I let a spoon slip from my grasp, and as we both leaned down to retrieve it, our faces hovered mere inches apart, caught in a moment where neither of us dared to move. The fragrance of his skin lingered in the air, a soft, clean aroma that had already permeated my pillow. The night prior, I can't recall who made the first move, but our lips met once more, swift and fervent, reminiscent of youthful lovers hidden away behind a closed door. That evening, we abandoned all pretense. It all began in the hallway. A fleeting look, a lingering caress, and then fingers tugging at fabric before thoughts could take shape. He pressed me softly against the wall, his mouth and eager hands exploring. "You're the only thought that occupies my mind," he whispered. "From dawn till dusk, even in her embrace, my heart longs for you." I ought to have intervened, to have urged him to go, yet I found myself unzipping his jeans, my hand encircling him, warm and already eager, as he let out a groan into my mouth, as if he had been stifling it for hours. He lifted my leg around his waist, his fingers gliding between my thighs, sensing the warmth of my desire. "Jesus," he murmured, "your essence cascades for me." I let out a soft moan, my body arching in response. "From the moment our eyes met in that mirror, I've longed for you." That shattered him. He swept me up, traversing the hallway with purpose, and nudged the guest room door ajar with the strength of his shoulder. As soon as we collapsed onto the bed, we became entwined, our mouths, skin, and limbs merging in an insatiable desire to devour one another. He immersed himself in me swiftly. This time, there will be no playful jabs, no inquiries made. With open arms, I embraced each inch, each thrust that sent the headboard colliding with the wall. He groaned, overwhelmed by the intensity of the sensation. "You feel too good." "I fear I won't endure much longer." "Then don't," I gasped. "Simply hand it over to me." He grasped my hands above my head, his hips colliding with mine, sweat gathering between us, breath transforming into something raw and instinctual. We united as if we were attempting to submerge ourselves in one another. In the aftermath, we found ourselves enveloped in silence, our gazes fixed upon the ceiling above. His hand grasped mine. "We have 2 more nights," he remarked. I chose to remain silent. I was already aware that I would savor every moment with them. The following day, I drew back the curtains to reveal a tempest outside. The rain patters softly against the windows, while the wind sways the trees in a graceful dance. A photograph arrived from my daughter, capturing the essence of the coast, radiant sun, golden sand, and beaming smiles. I lingered on her smile, captivated beyond what was appropriate. She resembled the version of myself that existed before the weight of regret settled in. As dusk settled, I ventured into the embrace of the rain. I craved the coolness of the air, a refreshing touch against my skin. I descended the porch stairs barefoot, stepping into the yard, allowing the water to drench my shirt and cling to my skin. I stood there, a figure enveloped in the heavy shroud of remorse. In that moment, I sensed his presence looming behind me. The door clicked shut, his footsteps muffled by the damp grass beneath him. "Why do you continue to let me in?" he inquired. "Because I am weary of feigning that I am not ravenous." His hand extended toward me, fingertips brushing against the drenched material at my waist, drawing me closer to him. Our bodies glistened, slick and scarcely adorned. His lips sought mine, with a languid intensity, plunging deeper into the moment. He stripped the shirt from my body beneath the rain, sinking to his knees, his lips tracing the contours of my stomach, my hip, my thigh. "I want to ensure I do this correctly," he stated. And he indeed did. He gently placed me on the damp grass, and we embraced each other as if eternity stretched before us. It ought to have concluded beneath the downpour that evening, yet it lingered on. In the aftermath, we found ourselves teetering on the edge of recklessness, or perhaps it was simply a newfound boldness that propelled us forward. We held the conviction that desire rendered us invincible, that it possessed the power to construct a refuge resilient enough to withstand the impending collapse. We ceased our vigil for the night, for the hush, for the sealed entrances. As I stepped into the pantry, I drew him in alongside me, a spark igniting when his hand grazed my lower back while I reached for the sugar. I kissed him as if I craved for him to melt into my very being. He hoisted me onto a shelf, raised my skirt, and his fingers were inside me before I could even draw a breath. "You're always ready for me," he whispered, his voice quivering as I sank my teeth into his shoulder. "You have a way of making me lose sight of everything around me, and I longed for that escape, if only for a fleeting moment. We advanced in a close-knit hush, breathless and alert, my sound consumed as he pressed his lips against mine. We didn't quite reach the end. A sudden knock on the kitchen door sent us darting away like startled teenagers, yet the lingering ache remained long after he had zipped up and exited as if nothing had transpired. I began to feel a growing resentment for the distance that lingered between our touches, an insatiable longing for the sound of his voice, even in moments when I was not enveloped in his embrace. We would encounter one another in the most unexpected of locales. The backseat of his car rested at the fringe of the woods, the stairwell, shortly after twilight. In the desolate upstairs guest bathroom, I sank to my knees, taking him into my mouth with a deliberate slowness that nearly drove him to madness. "You're not real," he breathed, his gaze fixed on the way I moved. "You are a vision that will surely unravel me." As he arrived, I consumed it all, locking my gaze with his. I yearned for him to etch it into his memory for all time. Yet, dreams are fleeting. On the second morning of her return, everything shifted. She hummed once more, spinning gracefully in the kitchen, her cheeks aglow with a vibrant light. He perched beside her at the island, nodding, his smile stretching too wide. I observed them from the sink, soap suds clinging to my hands, my heart clawing at my chest. I beheld it. Her fingers brushed against his. The manner in which he withdrew, just a fraction. And I was aware. She sensed it as well. The betrayal has not come to pass, not just yet. Yet the transition, the elusive fragment. The deception festered in the space, much like decay hidden beneath the floorboards. That evening, I ascended to his quarters. In the corridor, I lingered until she stepped into the shower, the sound of music filling the air, humming a tune that I found unbearable. I seized his wrist, drawing him into the shadows of the guest room, pinning him against the door. Once more, I murmured softly. He refrained from inquiring about the reason. He kissed me as if he had been deprived for an eternity. "I can't stop," he murmured, his lips brushing against mine. "Then don't," I had already whispered. With my back turned to the door, I gripped his belt and rode him. His lips brushed against my shoulder. My fingers entwined in his hair. The slightest creak of the floorboards beneath us heightened the sense of peril in the air. Incredibly captivating. "You're going to destroy me," he lamented. "You have already mentioned that." I gasped for breath. "And I have already accomplished that." We hurried onward, urgency propelling us, as if we were fleeing the inevitable repercussions. We sensed that we were closing the gap. As I arrived, I sank my teeth into his shoulder to stifle my cries. He came moments later, immersing himself fully and quaking with intensity. In the silence that followed, not a single word was exchanged between us. We lingered in the shadows, gasping and shattered. The stillness enveloping us, heavy with inevitability, yet we were not as silent as we had imagined. On the following morning, she had transformed. Chillier, more subdued. She prepared the coffee in silence. She refrained from making any contact with him, and when she cast her gaze upon me, it was devoid of suspicion. It felt as though I had become a mere echo, fading away from her heart, even if she remained unaware of the reason. That evening, I found myself alone in my room, the door securely fastened behind me. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror, bare beneath the fabric of a robe. I did not secure it. I followed the impressions on my thighs, remnants of his grip that was perhaps a touch too fierce. I brushed my fingers against the spot where his lips had lingered before quietly making my way into the hallway. I held back my tears, not at this moment. Yet, I sensed an accumulation akin to a tempest looming at the periphery of all we had created. He rapped softly, a tentative sound echoing in the stillness. I chose not to respond. In that stillness, a sense of farewell lingered in the air. He did not return that night, no gentle tap. Silence holds no secrets. In the shadows, no fingers wander along my hip. I lingered in anticipation, not remaining still, but moving about, pacing, sitting, standing, opening the door only to shut it once more. The stillness was excruciating, not due to the absence of his touch, but rather from the dread of what that absence signified. Perhaps he had selected her. Perhaps guilt had ultimately triumphed. Perhaps he possessed a strength that surpassed my own. I yearned to feel the heat of anger within me. Yet, all I experienced was a profound emptiness, as if he had departed with fragments of me I hadn't realized I had surrendered. The following day, he completely steered clear of me. He settled beside her once more, allowing her to rest against him. His lips curled into a smile as she revealed something on her phone. I lingered in the kitchen, observing them as if I were an outsider. She extended an invitation for coffee. Her voice carried a melodic sweetness, yet her eyes were not. They observed me closely, evaluated my dimensions, as if she possessed a secret knowledge or perhaps something more ominous. She sensed a stirring deep within her, anticipating the validation she sought. I stumbled through my gratitude and exited the room, heart pounding in my chest, a warning drum echoing through my veins. That afternoon, he discovered me amidst the blooms of the garden. I found myself feigning the act of pruning the lavender, yet my hands trembled uncontrollably. He knelt beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must bring this to a halt." I averted my gaze from him. "You have already accomplished that." His hand brushed against mine softly, reminiscent of remorse. "It has transcended my desires." A soft, bitter laugh escaped my lips, tinged with a sense of brokenness. It was never meant to be. It revolved around what we had taken. What was essential, not what was just. He gazed at the earth that lay between us. Last night, she inquired about my happiness. I halted momentarily. What did you imply? That I was untruthful? Once more, he appeared before me under the cloak of night. He remained silent. I have just entered my room. Once the house fell into silence, I found myself nestled in bed. Rose's blue eyes were wide open. He settled in next to me, and I instinctively leaned into him. Our lips never met. Not immediately. He simply held me, his face nestled against my neck. My fingers quivered as they brushed against my ribs. She is aware of his whisper. I inclined my head in agreement. She remains silent on the matter. Not at this moment. Yet it exists, in the spaces that lie between each word. We did not share an intimate moment. This is not the first time. We clung to one another, a quiet desperation enveloping us, as if we were preparing for the impending chaos. His lips finally met mine, a languid, melancholic, and perilous embrace. His hands glided over my body as if etching the farewell into his very being. I made way for him. Allow him to enter. And as he entered me, it was neither forceful nor untamed. It was profoundly devastating. He moved with a deliberate slowness, as if he understood that this would be the final moment I would allow anyone to penetrate my depths. I entwined my legs around him, my nails trailing softly down his back. Our foreheads touched, and he murmured words that tightened my throat. "You brought me into focus. You caused me to lose my memory." Fear gripped me. "You were never merely an error." I arrived in silence, gaze unblinking, locked onto his. And when he arrived, he uttered my name as if it were a secret unveiled. He lingered until the first light of dawn began to break, glided away like a whisper in the night. The following day, she met my gaze with a directness that was both disarming and enchanting, her smile illuminating the moment. Yet it lacked authenticity. In that moment, I understood that the deepest form of heartbreak arises when a person possesses the truth but remains paralyzed, uncertain of how to act upon it. She invited me to join her for lunch. Only the two of us, not Lucas. Abandon all phones. She expressed that she felt my absence keenly, yearned for moments shared with her mother. We found ourselves seated at a quaint little cafe, a place she cherished during her high school days. In those initial moments, everything felt nearly ordinary. She spoke of the wedding favors, hues, the blossoms that danced in her thoughts. I inclined my head in agreement, smiled at just the right moments. Yet, I sensed her gaze upon me with an intensity that was almost palpable, as if she were constructing a grand design. And then, In the midst of her words, she paused. She placed her fork gently on the table. She placed her hands delicately on the table, fingers intertwined. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, yet it lacked gentleness. "Are you sharing your bed with him?" I stood still, my body paralyzed in that moment. The cafe surrounding us was in a constant state of flux. The soft sound of plates gently clinking together. Laughter fills the air, yet I continued onward. It felt as though my entire existence was distilled into the depths of her gaze. What I softly murmured, yet she refrained from asking once more. She was aware that I perceived it in the tension of her jawline. In the manner she remained unblinking. "Just tell me," she urged. "Please, I would appreciate it if you could respond without further prompting." I parted my lips, sealed it shut. My fingers quivered delicately at the rim of my glass. I might have chosen to deceive. One might have engaged in gaslighting. She might have insisted that her fears were merely the product of an overactive imagination. However, I chose not to, for the truth had been swelling within her, a silent scream waiting to be unleashed. And I could no longer keep it at bay. "I didn't mean to," I murmured softly. Indeed. Her gaze lingered on me, stretching into an eternity. And there was an essence within her. A gentle crack echoed through the air. "What is the duration?" "Ever since you departed that weekend." Her hands tightened into fists whenever I spoke of him. Each time I expressed my love for him. "You were fully prepared." She came to a halt, turned my gaze aside. "I hadn't intended for it to unfold this way," I remarked. "Yet you allowed it to unfold," she repeated with increasing intensity. "Within the walls of my home, alongside my fiancé. I am aware of what I previously stated. I am fully aware of my actions." She rose to her feet. Eyes shifted in curiosity, yet she remained indifferent. With a swift motion, she seized her bag and keys, uttering a single sentence. "It will remain etched in my memory forever. You are no longer my mother." She stepped outside. Did not look back. I lingered at the table long after the check had arrived. I returned to a house that felt only partially filled with life. Lucas was gone. She was gone. The wedding has been called off. Her father remained silent, offering no questions. He departed just 2 weeks later. He claimed he had forgotten how to love me. I mentioned that I had been an outsider for many years. Yet, he remained oblivious until the moment had slipped away. The guest room has become my sanctuary for sleep now. The scent lingers, a reminder of his presence. There are nights when I find myself awakening, my hand resting between my thighs, in pursuit of a presence that eludes my grasp. As I linger on the porch, my mind drifts to the question of whether he ever contemplates my existence. Should he recall the flavor of my essence? The melodies I conjured amidst the rain? The manner in which I breathed his name, as if it were a cherished secret? We alone were worthy. Yet, I possess a deeper understanding. He is likely reconstructing in another location, in the company of someone more secure. And my daughter. She dispatches postcards, brief and concise, respectful. Do not ever conclude with affection. At times, I ponder whether my longing for her surpasses my yearning for the warmth of a gentle touch. At times, I ponder whether the stillness is precisely what I have earned. He was the fiancé of my daughter, and I was the woman who selected deprivation in place of dignity. The injury remains unhealed. It merely transforms its form.